Okay, moving on to dietary protein. I think you get a break after this one. So I wanted to start with, why do we even need to eat protein? And the answer is simple. There are 9 simple reasons that we'll go through extremely quickly. There are countless physiologic processes in our bodies that require proteins, right? And as you remember from medical school, the building blocks for proteins are amino acids. And there are some amino acids that our body is unable to synthesize. So those amino acids have to be taken in our diets. And they are called the 9 essential amino acids. They're listed here, and they are the reason that we have to eat protein. There's no other way for us to get these amino acids into our body to be able to synthesize the proteins that are required for so many vital physiologic processes. So how much protein do we need? The Institute of Medicine recommends 0.8 grams per kilo per day of protein. That's about 10 to 35% of our daily caloric intake. For men, that equates out to about 56 grams a day, and for women, about 46 grams per day. And just to give you some frame of reference for how much we actually take in, the Western countries take in more like 70 to 100 grams a day, so much more than the requirement. And in contrast, less developed, poorer countries take in about half that, so about 50 grams per day. Are all protein sources equal? So this is kind of a rhetorical question. The answer is obviously no. The term high quality protein has come to mean protein sources that provide all 9 of those essential amino acids. And almost universally those are animal sources, so meat. But I do want to talk about whether meat equals protein. I mean, certainly meat is high in protein, but there's come to be this kind of thought processes, at least in our culture, that meat is the only source of protein or the primary source of protein. And I hope that part of what you will learn in our brief review of proteins is that there are a lot of other very healthy foods in our diet that can also provide a lot of protein, and that's something that you can use to counsel your patients if they may benefit from a lower meat diet because of certain medical conditions. So meat definitely is high in protein, but it is not the only source. Fish. So the next several slides are going to be breaking down certain foods and food groups and talking about if they're high in protein and what other nutrients they may carry with them. So we need to think about also not just is it high in protein, is it high quality protein, but also what comes in the package with it. So fish is certainly a high protein food, but also comes with some other very healthy things in the package. We don't have a specific talk slated on fats, but I think Dr. Now will probably talk about different kinds of fats in his oils lecture. But fish, as you probably know, is very high in very healthy fat, specifically omega-3 fatty acids. So in addition to wonderful, healthy, lean protein, the fats that do come in it are healthy fats. Just a side note on fish. When you are choosing a seafood, try to pick things that are low on the food chain. That will reduce the mercury content and also other pollutants that can be found in seafood. So that would be things like trout, tilapia, haddock, and also shrimp, and the small oily fish, so sardines and anchovies are also very healthy, very high in good fat and protein, and also low in all those pollutants because not lots of fish have eaten them, and then lots of fish eaten them. So eggs is an interesting one. There's a lot of controversy recently surrounding the health risks and benefits of eggs, mostly related to their cholesterol content. And certainly eggs are high in cholesterol, but the most recent meta-analyses that I found discussing the healthy or not healthiness of eggs showed that although they are high in cholesterol, their cholesterol content may actually not raise blood cholesterol levels significantly and may not be linked to cardiovascular disease as we had previously thought in non-diabetic patients. The findings were different for diabetic patients. So I think similarly to the way the trends are kind of changing and what kinds of fats and how much of them we should be eating, this whole egg controversy seems to be sort of turning on its head. So certainly a great source of protein. They also have lots of healthy minerals in them, zinc and choline and B vitamins. They're super healthy for other reasons. So if you're worried about the cholesterol content, just skip the yolk. I mean, nobody's going to argue with that egg white is the perfect food. They have, well, maybe they would argue, but that's my superfood, egg whites. Poultry and pork, I put them together. There obviously are some differences, but bottom line with poultry and pork, choose lean meats and skip the skin. They are, of course, very high in protein, but you have to be careful with the fats that they bring with them. And then also a side note here on any kind of meat, I did want to mention that it's not just the protein that you choose and the quality of the protein, but how we prepare our food is really important too. And I think that's something that Dr. Marshall has mentioned and others, and that will probably be mentioned a lot in the course of the Med Chef's curriculum and certainly in the kitchen when you go there. But specifically with meats, have to be careful about cooking them at very high temperatures, and specifically grilling meat, whether it's poultry or pork or beef or whatever it is. Very high heat and a flame directly on meat can produce these heterocyclic amines and polycyclic hydrocarbons that are carcinogens in laboratory animals and probably in humans as well. So I guess that means baking our meat, boiling our meat, broiling our meat, and just watching the high temperature cooking is probably a good idea. Probably more to come in research on that. But beef, so this is the American staple for dinner, right? It's what's for dinner. This is what we eat for dinner in America. But certainly, whether you're on the camp of the saturated fat being a major link to cardiovascular disease or not, we probably eat too much red meat in America and need to cut back on that. There's potentially a colon cancer link with diets that are high in red meat, so one that we probably need to cut back on, and also one that definitely is related to the grilling issue and the possible introduction of carcinogens into our protein source. Processed meats, so I left these for last in the meat section, and I did that on purpose because there are probably more cons than pros when it comes to processed meats. Processed meat includes things that you see on the slide like hot dogs, bacon, any luncheon meat, or things like beef jerky, any kind of jerky. These are meats that have been packaged and processed in order to have a long shelf life, and preservatives have been used to accomplish that, whether it's salt or whatever it might be. So these are almost universally very high in sodium. The other thing that they're very high in is sodium nitrate, which is perhaps also a carcinogen and perhaps has a colon cancer link specifically. So these are ones that maybe we need to cut back as much as possible. And as Dr. Marshall was mentioning, mac and cheese is a super staple food in a lot of our patient populations. Hot dogs is too. And that's the meat a lot of times because they are really cheap. There's no arguing with the fact that a pack of hot dogs is really cheap for a meat source. So maybe you need to try to do a little bit of education there with families as well. Dairy, I think through the course of Med Chefs you'll get some more teaching on dairy. We didn't devote a slot to that one in this day, but I will mention here that it is a great protein source, whether it's milk or milk products like cheese or yogurt. Cheese, you have to be a little bit careful with the saturated fat content, and also with milk. I know there's some controversy as to whether the fat content is a good thing or a bad thing in dairy, but certainly it's a good protein source. Specifically with yogurt, I wanted to mention that Greek yogurt is very high in protein, and that's kind of recently become a very popular item and a very healthy one. So moving on to some plant protein, we did decide that meat is not the only source, meat and dairy. and animal products, but some plant products can be really great, really healthy protein sources as well. First off is nuts, and these are another kind of superfood, I think. That's a bowl of walnuts on my kitchen table. I didn't like the pictures of nuts that I took from the grocery store. But nuts are super high in protein, also very high in fiber. They also have some of the tocophenols and phytosterols and phenolic compounds that are antioxidants, and also have some anti-inflammatory properties. So they are a super healthy snack. The tree nuts specifically is what I'm talking about here, and that includes the whole list of cashews and pistachios, Brazil nuts and macadamia nuts and walnuts and pecans, pine nuts even. Peanuts are also a very healthy protein source, but they are actually, trivia point, a legume and not a nut, as you may know. But they are also have similar benefits. Also, nut butters, so peanut butter, almond butter, hazelnut butter are a very protein-packed, healthy snack. Just be careful with the added sugar, so try to get the kinds that have either no or little added sugar and salt. Soy products. So soy is another kind of superfood. It is the only vegetable protein source that contains all 9 amino acids. So it is a very healthy, complete protein source. Comes in various forms. Tofu, probably the best known. Soy milk, soybeans, edamame, and several different formulations of all of those. So it is very healthy, contains lots of other wonderful things, very high in fiber, iron, calcium, B vitamins. So a really good choice. I know a lot of vegetarians go for tofu, but also a great thing to introduce in place of meat for a great protein source with any meal. Other legumes. Oh, soy is a legume. I didn't mention that, obviously. It's a bean. So other legumes, including any beans, are a very healthy protein source, also very high in fiber, no sodium, no cholesterol, no fat, very healthy. Right in the middle of the picture here, you may not be able to see, are lentils, which I think are another really wonderful protein source. They're these very versatile little beans that you can throw a handful of into almost anything. And they're easier to cook than other beans. You don't have to soak them really at all, or certainly as long as other kinds of beans. And they're super nutrient packed. Other ideas with beans would be chickpeas, which you can really just get out of a can and then mix with some tahini and salt and make into hummus. That was one of the dishes that last year's Med Chefs class chose to highlight when they did one of their events and made some hummus on their own. It's very easy to make, very delicious, and a very healthy snack and great protein source. And I threw in a slide on grains here. I don't know how in the world that got into a protein talk, but this is how. So quinoa is this fad food that has been really marketed over the last couple of years. It is a fabulous protein source. It is completely protein packed. It has all 9 essential amino acids. It also has some antioxidants, some of those flavonoids, and also has some monounsaturated fatty acids, and is easy to cook, easy to transport and package. So there's a lot of talk about this in kind of just the world health category of this as a great food to be able to get to kind of nutrient poor areas. So some grains can actually be even very healthy protein sources. So in summary, dietary protein is essential. We have to have it to make the proteins that we have to have for so many different things and functions we have to do in our body. And then, as you will hear and have heard as a common theme in all of the lectures, get your protein from real food. So that includes things like lean meat in moderation. So my preferred order is fish and eggs, then poultry, then pork, then red meat, and then way down the line processed meats. Dairy is another great source, low fat in moderation. And then plant proteins. Don't forget the plant proteins. Soy products, other beans, nuts, and then the quinoa. And then didn't have time in this brief introduction to proteins to really go into protein supplements and protein powders and all of these high carb foods that claim to have added or high protein. But the basic principle is get your protein from protein sources. Get your healthy protein from real food. Careful how you cook your meat as far as introducing carcinogens, and then this also is becoming a theme, variety. So especially if you're choosing plant sources for your protein, get a wide variety so you can make sure you are getting all of those amino acids, but just in general, use various sources to get your protein and it will overall be healthier.